The Dustmen, those who believe everyone is already dead. In 2nd edition, they are called the Dustmen, and they are nicknamed the Dead. In 5th edition, they changed their names to the Heralds of Dust, and their nickname is now Dusters. The Dustmen say life's a joke. Nobody is alive. The entire multiverse, the prime material plane, the outer planes, the inner planes, this is all the afterlife. You are already dead, and this is where you wind up. Quote, all these worlds and all these universes are just shadows of another existence. End quote. Life is supposed to be full of celebration and positive feelings, and yet there is so much pain and suffering. This must mean that nobody is actually alive, that we're all dead. Quote, to join us, you must work to forget your passions. Emotions reveal you as one who still clings to the illusion of life. Remember this, without passion, a body has no pain. Divest yourself of all passions, and you have achieved the final stage of death. You have become one of the true dead. End quote. All stages of existence are levels of death. Primes are just started on their path, planars are a little further along, and petitioners are almost at the end. Undead have purged themselves of all passions and senses, attaining purity by becoming one of the true dead. That is the goal. In order to move up the ladder of truth, you must explore your so-called life to the fullest and understand your current state of existence with all its trials. You must be patient and not rush to the end goal. Respect death and don't ever treat it like a servant. Their primary plane of influence is the negative energy plane, and they maintain a citadel there. As their philosophy surrounds the potency and value of true death, the negative energy plane exemplifies their most holy of places. However, in 5th edition, their plane of influence has changed to Hades, I guess to fit their apathetic nature. Their role in Sigil is that they manage the Mortuary, where all of Sigil's dead are sent through portals to other planes, since the cage doesn't have room for graveyards and crypts. Allies and enemies. The Bleak Cabal and the Doom Guard favor their viewpoint. The Doom Guard also believe death is the goal of the multiverse, and the Bleakers like the hopelessness of their cause. The Fated understand their deterministic views. The Dustmen's fatalistic rejection of life is counter to the sign of the One, and the Society of Sensation is most opposed to the dead. Most Primes have trouble dealing with the Dustmen because their viewpoints on life and death are so extreme. Most factions, however, ignore the Dustmen, for the dead make few waves, and it's difficult for people so boring to offend. Eligibility. All races, classes, and alignments are allowed. Benefits. The Dustmen have something called the Dead Truce, a pact made between the Dustmen and the beings of the undead realm in a time more ancient than memory. This truce means all undead will ignore a member of the Dustmen faction as long as the Dustman does nothing to harm the undead creature. Every member of the faction, including the lowly namers, benefit from this. In addition to that, factotums who advance to the 4th circle learn that the Dead Truce allows them to command undead like neutral priests can. They gain the power of 1st level priests for the purposes of commanding undead and improve whenever they gain a level. A priest at this level gets +4 on all attempts to command undead. Dustmen can also request aid from undead within the faction by convincing their superior they need help, successfully commanding the undead, and then rewarding them for their service. They can only attempt this once per day, and the dead who abuse this might end up in the dead book themselves. Restrictions. The chance of a Dustman being resurrected is half that of everyone else. The concept of raising and resurrection is counter to the philosophy of the faction, and so it's not something willingly accepted by most Dustmen. The Factol of the Dustmen is Factol Skull, a neutral evil, male, lich planar, and 19th level wizard. His equipment is listed as whatever magic items are best for the situation, quote, as he has had hundreds of years to collect items from almost every known plane, end quote. The same is said of what spells he has access to. He has tons of undead and weird living minions, including a Glabrizu demon that acts as his familiar. He spends most of his time in the faction's headquarters in the negative energy plane, seldom visiting Sigil. Most Factol meetings he doesn't attend in person, instead using an advanced form of project image. When he projects himself or travels in person, he cloaks himself in many illusions to appear as a human male, or in the case of Factol meetings, as a black robe with the Dustman symbol floating above. Most people don't realize he is a lich, and only a few Dustman high-ups have seen his true form. He always speaks in a dry, echoing monotone. He is technically evil, but only to those who equate goodness with a respect for life. Quote, "Though determined to have his own way, Skull's in no hurry to accomplish his goals, so he seldom behaves in an evil fashion." End quote. The Factol's manifesto says no character or party should attempt combat with Skull. Those who do should not win. He can cast double the normal of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd level spells for his level, giving him 10 of each. He can animate dead simply by touching a corpse, and they are tougher and more difficult to turn than regular zombies, and he can emit a flame of negative energy from his fingertips. He regenerates 5 HP every round, even if his entire body has been burned to ash and scattered about. For each 10 feet of scattering, it takes 1 month to regenerate himself. He also knows a ritual that can create free-willed undead like Whites that is only known to him. Skull is on the road to true death, but he stays around out of a sense of duty, to educate and enlighten as many people about the way of death so they eventually might reach true death. Skull strives to know everything and feel nothing. During the faction war, he was banished to the mazes like most of the Factols. Once again, he is back in 5th edition with no explanation as to how. History. Some say the Dustmen are the oldest faction. They've been around longer than anyone can remember. Their founder, the Lich Skull, is still the Factol to this day. Change among the dead happens slowly, so there's not much to talk about in their history, other than one incident. A sensate named Corilla Mavasil wanted to know what it felt like to die, to taste the ultimate experience. So she went to the Mercy Killers who obliged in killing her, with plans of having her fellow sensates resurrect her. However, the dead wouldn't give her corpse back, and eventually the Society of Sensation broke into the mortuary and stole her body. The Dustmen were probably the faction least affected by the faction war. They didn't really care that their faction was forced to dissolve, and they continued operating the mortuary. The term Dustmen became synonymous with anyone who disposes of corpses. Within the faction, there is a group called the Hopeful. They agree with the primary philosophy that everyone exists in a multiverse of death and the goal of achieving true death. However, the Hopefuls hope to return to life. They know that the celebration of life only occurs in a universe they no longer inhabit and cannot find. They hope that by achieving true death, they can loop back around and reach the true reward, life. The other dead view the Hopeful as a foolish splinter sect. Quote, "A return to life might come in time. If not, who cares?" End quote. Most Dustmen are human. People with short lifespans seem to sympathize with the Dustman philosophy as they see death more than others do, so they feel closer to it. Other races seem too connected to life to consider dead philosophy, such as elves being a long-lived, life-loving bunch, but there is a non-human minority within the faction. Religious devotion requires passion, and progressing among the dead means letting go of that passion, so clerics gradually become less devoted to specific gods and more devoted to death as a force. Many wizards, being scholarly types, favor the introspection of the Dustmen. Few rogues and fighters join since their profession encourages flamboyance and emotion. The uncommon Dustman bard practices odes and dirges that honor death rather than celebrate life, and he analyzes music and lyrics instead of enjoying it. Druids revere nature, and since death is a natural progression of all life, quite a few druids do join. Most Dustmen are neutral aligned. The longer one stays in the dead, the more his alignment shifts toward true neutral, and only the neutral aligned can embrace true death. Hierarchy. To join the faction and become a namer, one must promise before witnesses to serve the faction, and declare their knowledge that they, like all in the multiverse, have left life behind. Namers serve as corpse collectors and mortuary aides. Those with promise, and are at least 4th level, become factotums, which the Dustmen call initiates. The lowest ranking factotums are initiates of the 5th circle, performing guard duty, various assigned missions, and escorting visitors and funeral parties. To be initiated in the 5th circle, they must attend their own funeral, detaching themselves from worldly possessions and making peace with family and friends. Factotums that perform well go through a new initiation to become part of the 4th circle, and then another all the way down to 1st. These ceremonies are secret, so we don't know what the rest of the ceremonies look like. The 4th circle consists of factotums who have performed well. The 3rd circle is lesser free-willed undead, ghast, wights, and wraiths. The 2nd circle is more powerful free-willed undead, like liches, specters, and vampires, and the 1st circle holds the Factol and his factors. The undead in the 3rd circle are actually created through a ritual only known to Factol Skull, out of factotums from the 4th circle. They are told to hide their undead nature and true rank, so any living dustman of the 4th circle you talk to can actually be an undead from the 3rd. Their headquarters in Sigil is the Mortuary, where all who die in Sigil are sent. The dustmen pay a small amount to people who bring corpses in, these are called collectors, so many of the hive's poor regularly patrol the hive and ditch where people die in droves every day. The Mercy Killers have a portal in the prison that leads directly here for easier corpse transport. The dustmen prepare corpses through mummification, embalming, etc. in the mortuary and then send them through portals either to cemeteries on other planes or the elemental plane of fire for cremation. The mortuary sits between Blackshade Lane and Ragpicker Square in a dismal part of the hive. It appears as a low, menacing dome with clusters of windowless vaults strewn around it. Spiky black buttresses radiate from its center. It can house 250 faction members, but usually there's only 50 to 200 at a given time. Once you pass through the front gate, you arrive in the Great Hall, where important guests and funeral parties are received. Funeral groups pass from the Great Hall through a central chamber reserved for dustman gatherings to view the departed in the Memorial Hall or an antechamber. They then move to one of 6 or so interment chambers ringing the perimeter of the main floor. These rooms are made of black flagstones and contain portals leading to prime worlds or neutral outer planes, Arcadia, Mechanus, Acheron, Limbo, Isgard, and Pandemonium. There is a dustman-only area on the main floor that houses a records room containing information on interments and faction membership, a library housing books and scrolls on undead, philosophies of death, burial practices, lists of grave sites, and necromantic magic, a kitchen, refectory, a common room, and a dustman dormitory. Most of the work is done in the central area of the upper floor. In one of these rooms, corpses are received, inventoried, and sorted, and then they are moved to the embalmer's chambers. Several special rooms up here have portals to the lower and outer planes. There's also a council chambers, an armory, and Secretary Trevant's office. Commissal Trevant is Skull's appointed secretary and second in command, handling daily business and sigil matters, while Skull is off in the negative energy plane. Many people are shocked at how many undead are present in the mortuary. Free-willed undead like wights and wraiths tend to keep out of public eye, while lesser undead such as zombies and skeletons act as faction laborers. Besides the mortuary that acts as their headquarters in Sigil, they also have a headquarters in the negative energy plane, a citadel called the Fortress of the Soul. A trip to the fortress is one of the greatest rewards a dustman can imagine. The citadel is mostly empty except for the 50 or so dustmen who quietly contemplate death. They are surprisingly helpful to those lost on this plane and escort them through a portal to Sigil. This portal only opens once a week and exits in what was once the Hall of Speakers. In addition to their 2 headquarters, they also have the Court of Woe. The Court of Woe is where overflow petty criminals are sent when the Fraternity of Order have too many people to process in the city courts. It is an empty marble hall, but if you are a dustman or have a writ of transfer from the governors, then when you walk inside the door, you go through a portal to the actual Court of Woe in the negative energy plane. It is a mammoth hall built of calcified husks of all manner of beings. It is presided over by a Nalfejni judge named Gabberslug. Criminals are sentenced to perform tasks for the dustmen, or if they are truly deserving of the worst punishment, or if they anger Gabberslug, then they are drained. What I mean by that is, like all Nalfejni, Gabberslug feeds on negative emotions, so he will draw energy from their fear, hatred, and despair, leaving them as empty shells, unable to sleep, fight, or think properly for several weeks. Occasionally, he gets carried away and drains them to death, but the Factol then threatens to take away his food supply and puts him in his place, for a while at least.